Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and yeah, this week's kind of a mess, all over the place, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. See, this is the sort of week on the Hot 100 I actually find pretty difficult to handle, because we didn't actually get album bombs, but just enough songs from 3 different projects to make this a handful in an inopportune time. At this time of year when I'm knee-deep in bigger projects, I really don't need Billboard Breakdown to get more complicated, especially when I don't have a lot of faith that any of this is going to last that long and a whole chunk of it's not any good. But that's just me whinging. There'll be more of that coming. Let's get to our top 10 and our big story. For the first time in her career, Sabrina Carpenter has taken the number 1 with Please, Please, Please. And let's make this clear, she did it on damn near streaming alone. Sales are solid and the song appears to have finally been shipped to the radio, but it was streaming that got her to that top spot. And at least for a little while, it's gonna be the condition that determines if she actually stays there. Now compare this to I Had Some Help by Post Malone and Morgan Wallen that was pushed back to number 2. The sales are better and it spent the week running up that radio margin at the top, but when the gulf in streaming is wide enough, that margin is gonna matter more. And let's make it clear, the competition is really between those 2 songs alone. I like that a bar song, Tipsy by Shaboozey, jumped up to number 3 on sales dominance and strong streaming, and the radio finally giving him some serious muscle, but I'm sorry, those margins are just too wide at this point. Although it was enough to get over Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter at number 4, which might have better airplay, but slipped on streaming and is lagging on sales. Now the next 3 songs didn't shift position, mostly because the upward momentum remained somewhat consistent. $1 Million Baby by Tommy Richman's at number 5, and it's really trying to chase down Espresso. Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar's at number 6, where the radio growth may have stalled out a little bit and it got overtaken on streaming, but that big Juneteenth concert is likely going to spike it in a very big way. And Too Sweet by Hozier's at number 7, where the airplay is slowing down, but streaming and sales, they're at least holding up. It at least was enough to beat out Beautiful Things by Benson Boone, which is actually back at number 8, mostly as a factor of not collapsing as quickly as they should in an okay sales week, which was likely enough to edge out the margins for Lose Control by Teddy Swims at number 9, which actually has better radio but worse streaming overall. Finally, we got Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish actually slipping back to number 10, which is what happens when your streaming might be stable, but you've got a long way to go on the radio in order to fill in the gaps. This was the mistake of not capitalizing on the virality very well. Now that naturally takes us to our losers and dropouts, and surprisingly there's a lot of the latter. The biggest of notes are probably Made for Me by Money Long clinching a year-end list spot for 2024, and Fiend by Travis Scott and Playboi Carti hopefully falling short. Sadly likely also the case for Obsessed by Olivia Rodrigo as well, but then we also saw a lot of album bomb cuts from Taylor Swift make their exit as well, like But Daddy I Love Him, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, and So Long London. Oh, and Family Matters by Drake is gone too, not gonna complain. And we also got a lot of losers here, with a few more from Taylor with Down Bad at 64 and Who's Afraid of Little Old Me at 83, but it also spilled onto Billie Eilish as well, with Chihiro at 36, Wildflower at 57, L'amour de ma vie at 70, and Blue at 84. And you know, while we're talking about continued losers, Enough Miami by Cardi B is just out of traction at 89, and Carnival by Kanye West, Ty Dolla $ign, Rich the Kid, and Playboi Carti hit 99. Then off the debut, Close to You by Gracie Abrams stumbled to 69. Off the return, The Boy Is Mine remix from Ariana Grande hit 74, and the one gain for Co Wetzel just evaporated to fall back to 49. Outside of those, One of One by Gunna lost a step to 50. I Think I'm in Love with You by Chris Stapleton and Dua Lipa is just not getting momentum at 66. Halfway to Hell by Jelly Roll fell to 75, and Take Her Home by Kenny Chesney hit 93. Now this is where I might say that our returns and gains compensated by being a bit more interesting, yet in the former group alongside Don Toliver's album impact bringing back Attitude with Charlie Wilson and Cash Cobain to 58 and Bandit to 73, we also got Let Your Boys Always Be Country by Jason Aldean at 94, I'm inclined to check out. But the gains are mostly better. Just try to ignore Beautiful As You by Thomas Rhett rising off the debut to 85, and Wine Into Whiskey by Tucker Wetmore continuing up to 68. The rest are considerably better. I like The Door by Teddy Swims getting traction as a second hit to 76. The Man He Sees in Me by Luke Combs got a nice album boost to 39. And most importantly, Chappell Roan is seeing consistent gains for multiple songs, with Hot to Go up to 55 and Red Wine Supernova at 54. And when it's not her only success story this week, that is a huge plus. Unfortunately, we got a lot of new arrivals to work with, and unfortunately, we gotta start with number 100. Chevrolet by Dustin Lynch featuring Jelly Roll.
Girl, you just found one less step away. Yeah, in a Chevrolet.
I just don't know why Dustin Lynch has had the chart longevity that he has, especially when most of his relatively minor hits are otherwise completely forgettable. But then I remember about 10 years ago, I gave him some light praise, and I think we've all been paying for it ever since. I apologize. Anyway, this is a collab with Jelly Roll where if you just read the lyrics, it's a generally tedious barroom hookup that's rooted in car brand name porn. What else is new? But that melody was instantly familiar. And for those of you who don't know Dobie Gray's version, or even the cover by Uncle Kracker from the early 2000s that's frankly better than it has any right to be, this is liberally borrowing from Drift Away, a classic of 1970s soul and one of my all-time favorite songs and karaoke staples. And these two can't muster any soulful swell or texture beyond the oversold twang, and you would think that'd be right in Jelly Roll's wheelhouse. Now, he admittedly sounds better than Dustin Lynch, but is that really saying that much when the song is being played so broadly? Yeah, okay, bastardization of a classic song for this sort of dated, forgettable garbage. Both these men have long worn out any goodwill or welcome from me. Trash. Next, number 98, Kryptonite by Don Toliver.
Calling, she feeling in the air tonight. She pulling on my chain at the Kryptonite. Call me Superman, she my Kryptonite.
So alright, the reviews for the new Don Toliver album are largely in, and honestly, they've been kind of inconsistent. Mostly some praise for his unique voice, but little else in the production and content that's been that compelling or interesting. And that's basically been my issue with Don Toliver for years now. Just our luck, he charted 4 new songs this week, with this being the album opener, and, well, it seemed like there might have been some cool ideas. The wiry snarl, the thicker guitar against the trap knock with that distant snare, it was kinda nifty, before we slipped into the fractured glassy mix where the bass swamps out everything and any melody gets subsumed into the mass with the feminine backing vocals from FKA Twigs of all people. I mean, it's trying to sell this drugged out biker attitude with this girl who goes as hard as he does, but I'm just not sure Don Toliver is all that convincing in this lane. He doesn't have that darker edge in his delivery, and then when you get lines like treat her panties like a rover, I pull her over, I find it hard to take this that seriously. Not saying it's bad, but after the beat switch doesn't hit nearly as hard as it thinks it does, let's just move on. Number 95, Front Door Famous by Luke Combs.
The spot I can't replace it, in a heartbeat, man, I trade it. Cause it ain't got nothing on being front door famous.
I have seen some folks cite this opener as the best song on that new Luke Combs album. I disagree. There are a lot of cuts with more emotional weight that feel a little bit more lyrically nuanced, but as an opener, it's got a lot of charm. A nice mid-tempo, neo-traditional country tune with gentle touches of fiddle and piano to accent that lead acoustic line, and the underlying sentiment as a new father, where despite his fame and success on the road, there's just nothing quite like the moment of your son acknowledging when you come home. Hell, I don't have kids, but Luke Combs can really sell that resonance. There's pathos. It feels very real. Again, I think there are plenty of cuts that aim to do a little more on the album. The verses here feel very abbreviated overall, but I also can't deny that it does exactly what it's designed to do. For a certain audience, it's gonna go off. Really good song, no problem at all that it is here. Number 92, Ice Age by Don Toliver featuring Travis Scott.
She think I'm Mike Jones, why I had to put it down in the Ice Age. Where I'm from, you come through late, you don't do that alone.
So the way Don Toliver structured his newest album is a bit like a compilation of EPs, each with 4 songs, with pretty much the only cuts that charted coming from the first 2 EPs, with this likely only crossing over thanks to the Travis Scott feature, and he handles both the hooks and one verse. I gotta wonder why we even bother with Don Toliver sometimes. I mean, maybe to some audiences, another selling point would be Cash Cobain and Banks contributing to the production. And you know what, honestly, I kind of do like the beat here. The nocturnal rattle of guitars against the scratches and the bass rumble with the occasional ragged synth sizzle, and that's actually before we get to the beat change that justifies Don Toliver being here at all. That's actually a little bit more watery with a sharper groove. It's just a shame that we're stuck with Travis Scott in his lethargic, humming, flex for girls mode, where everyone is high, he's trying to hype his crew and his label, and he's making veiled shots at the Kardashians for being plastic or not real. As if I buy a shred of depth or authenticity in pretty much anything Travis Scott has ever put out. But hey, you know what? If you want to coast on the chill vibe, I think I might prefer Don Toliver's more direct hedonism overall. It's not really wowing me, but the hook's decent enough. I guess I'll take it. Number 91, Thorns by Suicide Boys. It seems like we were just waiting for the floodgates to break open properly for Suicide Boys, especially given how long they've been lurking just below the Hot 100 for chart success. And thus, with their new album, New World Depression, it launched 3 songs this week, with this being an abbreviated, laid-back trap clanker with admittedly a really pretty keyboard line that really complements the piano flourishes and DJ Fella's sample quite well. I can't say the song does the most with it though. This song doesn't have much of a hook beyond that sample and that melody, and the 2 verses are a lot of gunplay and flexing. And while there are a couple good lines, Ruby DeCherry has that Gambit reference, Scrim reps pretty hard for New Orleans and actually staying sober, I feel like there needs to be a little more meat to this to be genuinely great. Overall, it's good, just wanted to hear more. Number 90, Pink Pony Club by Chappell Roan.
Pony girl, and you dance at the club, oh mama. I'm just having fun on the stage in my heels. It's where I belong, down at the...
I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams that Chappell Roan would get 4 songs simultaneously charting on the Hot 100 and with so much upward momentum, especially for a song this old. Pink Pony Club dates back to 2020. It was a song released when she was still on Atlantic right before they dropped her, world-class fumbling of the bag there, and even though it's been repackaged for her album that came out last year, this is still excellent. I love that slow build across the piano that drops suddenly into those synthetic stings and the fizzy percussion before getting a glittery guitar solo. I love how well the song showcases Rowan's classical vocal training on the verses before the girlish exuberance of the hook, and I love just how well it nails the odd balance of joy and melancholy, leaving her home in the Midwest and likely not making her parents all that happy as she goes to dance in drag clubs out in Santa Monica, where there is still some love for the memories in Tennessee and that lingering hope that the connection could be reforged. Now, if I was nitpicking, it could be that the song sounds a little bit threadbare at points. I'm not sure it rises to a Casual or Coffee or My Kink is Karma or even a Red Wine Supernova, but this is still absolutely terrific. I'm thrilled that she's seeing this kind of success. Please, check this out. Number 86, Burgundy by Suicide Boys.
Ever since I got conscious, time was obvious. Counting down the seconds, I was left with no options. Snorting oxys off a Smith & Wesson. Body filled with narcotics, fuck the optics. Bitch, next question.
Alright, next up from Suicide Boys, where, again, we don't really get a hook, but the song is a lot longer and off of that grisly trap knock and haunted vocal samples that apparently originate from the duo's earliest work, although the mastering is a lot better done here. You get more developed scenes running through the debauchery that they actually used to live. Now, the one thing I will give Suicide Boys a lot of credit for is how seriously they framed the drug abuse and the toll it took on them. For Scrim translating to a pretty bad relationship with his folks, and a lot of newfound guns and violence. For Ruby, it's more flexing, but an acknowledgement that it's just barely holding him back from the brink. But I don't know, I'm left thinking that there should be a little bit more there, a deeper insight. A vivid picture to be sure, but it's a little two-dimensional. Still solid, I get more of the appeal, maybe not fully there though. Number 78, Tore Up by Don Toliver. Why am I listening to this and thinking, this would be something that Lil Uzi Vert would make? I mean, seriously, the flashy guitar work that's washed out and wedged behind the trap groove with even screamo samples, where the song is built more for rock star flexing on the festival stage, and yet I am not remotely convinced that Don Toliver pulls it off, even if the tremolo riffs on the final solo were kinda rad. But at least Lil Uzi Vert has an intensity and a desire to go hard that Don Toliver's crooning just does not fit nearly as well. He doesn't have the raw flair to go harder in his voice, at least not here, and when the lyrical detail is so flimsy, the most you get is an admittedly kind of okay hook. Maybe this could have worked more if Don Toliver bothered to write more than just one verse. It's only about 2 minutes long and it feels shorter, but as it is, okay, call it more interesting idea than in execution. Leave it there. Number 71, The Thin Gray Line by Suicide Boys.
My bitch looking like a I need a hoe who down, no eyes, what up ladies? Switched out the friendly smile, but the face that reads, fuck you, pay me.
So the downside of not knowing as much about this duo is that when I started digging into the details of the song and the lyrics, I didn't immediately recognize the alter egos that the boys credit for the song, and given that the title references the prison industrial complex, I was curious just how deeply they might be going in. But that's not really what the song is about at all. It seems to be more referencing their suicide cult-like fan base who would stand in line alongside their company, Grey 59, and even then it's more of an excuse for the duo to just keep on relentlessly flexing. And I'll be honest, I'm not nearly as impressed this time around. Bitches Belong in the Kitchen line are tired even before Scrim's flexing on the second verse, and given how this track also does not have a hook and runs under 2 minutes, why do I get the feeling that they could really do more with some of their ideas here? I do like the haunted warbling melody behind the very grim trap knock, but I'm just not sure that's enough at this point. It's just okay. Number 61, Brother Stone by Don Toliver featuring Kodak Black.
Don't tell me shut up, you are not my boss. Turn up so much now I just can't turn up.
Alright, last of the Don Toliver songs, and naturally the one that charts the highest has the Kodak Black feature. Always great to see. And naturally, Kodak Black takes up the majority of this song, from the hook to multiple verses. So you're stuck with his painfully awkward nasal flow, where it seems like he's half struggling to string any punchlines together, not helped by his opening lines referencing serving activists out of a baby bottle. And he clearly thought that was so charming and funny that in a later verse, he doubled down on the baby talk. What's so obnoxious about this is that after multiple verses and years where Kodak Black and the industry tried to showcase how he is a changed man through a very long redemption arc, a song like this, full of his smarmy, half-formed gloating, doesn't exactly do a lot to convince me that anything has stuck. He's leaning into some darker iconography because he can get away with it, and now he's got even less to say about it. Not that Don Toliver really covered himself in glory here, with the gunplay and the flexing that's generic as hell, and then dissing the girls who want something out of them after they fuck. He calls them one-hit wonders. But the line that jumped out to me was on his first verse, where he compares himself to a president with his ops more like Hillary. Okay, I get that in election years there tend to be more political bars on average that show a lot of folks don't know what the fuck they're talking about, including Don Toliver comparing himself to the treasonous convicted felon and sex pest that was the ex-president. But hey, you know what? When you got Kodak Black plainly unremorseful on the track and given his record, I guess the birds of a feather stick together. And they all wind up stinking. What do you know? What might be worse is I actually think the hook is kind of catchy off the stumbling pianos, but that let-in trap groove and the clipping bass really expose just how undercooked the instrumental actually is, outside of some very distant sizzling guitar that, of course, has no actual bite to it. Well, you know what? Off the hook alone, it's probably going to be enough to stick around. And it utterly sucks. Let's move on. Number 47, Devil Is a Lie by Tommy Richman.
On the bounce, baby, hell no. It's where I came from, baby, hell no. 'Cause I come from a different kind.
Okay, the big challenge for Tommy Richman was always going to be the second hit. I said that about Teddy Swims already this year. I generally liked $1 Million Baby, but I haven't really been inclined to revisit it much. I've gotten nourished by time at home, so this was going to be the test. And, yikes, this was what I was worried about, as basically we have Tommy Richman trying to thread the needle between his very 1980s R&B voice and a more grimy, Pharrell-esque mid-2000s beat, hit two different simultaneous windows of nostalgia. Hell, even his falsetto kind of reminds me a bit of Pharrell. But look, $1 Million Baby could get away with some of its pissier elements because the groove and the hook had some swagger to it. Here, the percussion sounds really cheap and grainy against the strings and the weedy melodic flourishes, and his singing is a hell of a lot screechier, which doesn't really work for another song where he is emphasizing that he's on the come up and this girl should really pipe down and know her place. She's got no confidence, you see, and while she wants to chase around his hype, can't you just pay him properly instead for his work? I mean, that combined with that stupid-ass Travis Scott reference on the hook, it's really giving me a lot of hype beast vibes of a different era, and it's not nearly as charming, especially when the song can barely run longer than 2 minutes. Look, I don't know. This guy kind of screams flash in the pan to me. Maybe if/when the album drops, I might change my mind, but this is a hell of a lot weaker than it needs to be. I would probably skip it. Number 35, Remember Him That Way by Luke Combs.
Any tough, and that ass on his chest is starting to fade. But I'll always remember him that way.
Okay, finally, we get to something legit great. One of the album highlights is Luke Combs reflects on his father, who he saw as Superman growing up. But as he's getting older, and so is his father, he's slowing down, and Luke Combs wants to remember him at his strongest. That memory will never fade. So when the song feels so organic with the prominent mandolin flutters opposite the supple bass and the dobro, especially as Luke Combs just lets his band jam out across acoustic instruments on the outro, there's just this warmth and comfort that feels unmistakable. The great energy here. And yeah, part of it is just me being a sucker for that mandolin, but I actually like how Luke Combs keeps the Superman motif going into that second verse. Not just with time being his kryptonite, but the truth about Superman, about how hard it can be to be a good person in this world all the time, and how much Luke Combs really admires that. I'm still not sure it's my favorite on the album. Hunting by Yourself, Ride Around Heaven, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, those are high bars to clear, but you know what, this is still great. Country radio, do the right thing. Give this a proper shot. Number 30, I Am Not Okay by Jelly Roll.
It's all gonna be alright. It's not okay, but we're all gonna be alright.
Well, at least he was kind enough to make the title self-evident, because no, I'm still not over Chevrolet and what he and Dustin Lynch did to a classic, but okay, fine. This looks like it's being positioned for Jelly Roll's next album. Lyrically, it's hitting a lot of the same notes as his usual struggles with his demons, but also a vaguely optimistic hope for redemption. And yet, this is fallen real flat for me. Maybe it's that thicker cushion of reverb, which pushes the guitars deeper into the mix in favor of strings, even the attempt at a guitar solo, or maybe how it just feels a little too clean. Actually, you know what? I'll just say it. It reminds me a lot of Christian contemporary music, and that's not a compliment. Especially when Jelly Roll has a richer palette of soul to draw from and he's going here. The one line I kind of like is the flip from I'm not okay to it's not okay on the hook. It's populist, it's a good subtle moment. But outside of that, Jelly Roll's formula is feeling increasingly tired and it's going in a very predictable and depressing direction. I do hope he gets better, if only so we can make a lot less of this. And finally, number 21, Whiskey Whiskey by Moneybagg Yo featuring Morgan Wallen.
Cause a memory came out to play and I'm tired of it, tired of it.
I knew it wouldn't just be Lil Durk for long. At some point, other rappers would have the genre crossover savvy to look at Morgan Wallen's numbers and see dollar signs. Post Malone was always going to make that full country fusion album, but Moneybagg Yo grabbing up the quick Morgan Wallen feature, shit, it's just smart marketing. Shame that just like with Lil Durk, the song turned out pretty lousy, starting with the hook that's flipping a nursery rhyme and making it about whiskey. I'm not even sure that makes Wallen's list of the worst references to my favorite alcohol, especially given that by his verse, he's bitterly comparing his ex to whiskey in the most tired and overused cliche across his entire catalog. But what gets actively distracting is, well, everything else. Let's start with the production. The tumbling brittleness of the guitars feels perpetually off sync with the trap percussion and Morgan Wallen singing, and that singing feels actively louder than Moneybagg Yo is on his verse. And it's Moneybagg Yo's song, and I don't even think he grasped the sentiment. No, I say that, but the intro has him in that same commiserating vibe, but the verse is him doing shots of tequila and hooking up with a country girl with some of the laziest country puns imaginable. Are you even surprised that he references Megan Thee Stallion? I mean, if he can't even get the booze right, it's in the title of the song twice. How should I be surprised that there's so much non-effort on display here? The more listens I give it, the more I get the vibe of a favor being exchanged. Morgan Wallen gets another rapper cosign, Moneybagg Yo gets the crossover single. And the result is a song that is crappy in the laziest way possible. And especially from Morgan Wallen, I'm tired of it. But yeah, that was our week that felt way too damn long. Worst, I think it's a toss-up, but I'm giving it to Brother Stone by Don Toliver and Kodak Black, with Chevrolet by Dustin, Lynch and Jelly Roll tying for the dishonorable mention with Whiskey Whiskey by Moneybagg Yo and Morgan Wallen. Best of the week, it is close, but I think Luke Combs will just snag the top spot for Remember Him That Way over top of Pink Pony Club by Chappell Roan as the honorable mention. It was real close, a ridiculously close competition there. Now next week, maybe we get a bit of a breather. I'm not seeing a major release on the horizon. I could be wrong. Although maybe Kalani might surprise us. Stay tuned. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.